details of that publicly.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm,
Just a couple of things to follow up on from Saeed's questions. On UNRWA, didn't you announce a ban of before this congressional action, you announced that the administration would no longer be funding UNRWA, and as far as I know, never lifted that.
we announced a suspension of funding to UNRWA pending the investigation that UNRWA launched.
Yeah.
That investigation is still going. But in the interim, before the time that investigation was finished, Congress enacted a ban.
So your pausing of aid basically precipitated this, it seemed to precipitate a situation where everybody pulled funding from UNRWA, and now you're sort of criticizing other people for cutting off UNRWA, or criticizing the Israelis for cutting off UNRWA. But it feels like
that is not what I criticized Israel for. I criticized I criticized the verbal attacks and threatening rhetoric and advancing legislation calling them a terrorist organization, which we do not agree with. We've always made clear that other countries have to make their own decisions about funding, and we've seen other countries restore funding. We just simply don't have the flexibility to make that decision because of the action that Congress took.
But the investigation and therefore the decision of this department on whether funding should go to UNRWA from the US is still up in the air. Is there any expectation of when that will be finished?
No, it is because it's a UN investigation. It's not something that we are conducting, so it's not something that we can put a timetable on. They've had 2 investigations ongoing. Yeah. One of them finished, one has not. But just to go back to the decision we made a decision to suspend funding to UNRWA after there were allegations made about UNRWA employees having been involved in October 7th that UNRWA told us they found credible. And so when you had UNRWA telling us they found credible, we thought that was an appropriate step to do, to suspend funding, to fund humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people through other mechanisms while that investigation proceeded. That investigation is still ongoing. Now, in the meantime, as I said, Congress came in and enacted this statutory restriction that bars us from funding UNRWA. But all the humanitarian assistance money that we would have provided to Palestinians through UNRWA, we are providing through other mechanisms, chiefly at the UN and then through other non-governmental organizations.
Right, and also just on the question of the day after talks that Saeed mentioned involving the UAE. Some mention in the Washington Post reporting on that of the US playing a coordinating role with this international force that would be responsible for securing Gaza, would be invited in by the PA. These are obviously details I'm not sure if you'll get into, but I wonder if you could sort of address the possibility of the US playing that kind of coordinating role, and separately whether US security contractors could also be involved in that.
I just don't want to get into any of the details at all. I think it's not appropriate at this time.
Sure. One more slightly separate thing. I just on the trip planning that you mentioned, I wonder, now that you're basically, the secretary has decided to stay for an extra day to attend the Netanyahu meeting, I wonder what the message to ASEAN and to that region, to Southeast Asia, is that you're also, that means it was announced yesterday that he would be earlier in the week that he would be attending the funeral of the Vietnamese former leader. Now, not going to attend that funeral. It seems like the participation at ASEAN is much shorter than was previously planned. This is all happening because the Prime Minister of Israel has decided to come to the US. How do you square that with sort of trying to tell Asian allies, partners in the region, Southeast Asia, there's obviously a really important region, that the US is sort of all in on your region, but when a crisis happens in the Middle East, this is a meeting that's run by the president. Does the Secretary of State really need to be there?
So I think our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific understand a few things. Number one, that this is the Secretary's 18th trip to the region. It was his first trip as Secretary. Continues to be a major priority for us, and we show that not just by our words, but by the amount of time he spent in the region. And as I said, it's his 18th trip. I think they understand that he will be visiting all of the countries that we announced that he's visiting. He will still travel to Laos, to Vietnam, to Japan, to Singapore, to the Philippines, to Mongolia. And I think that demonstrates our commitment, as do the investments that we've made in the region, as do the partnerships that we have announced in the region. I think people understand that there was a meeting he had planned to attend, and the timing of the meeting got shifted. due to something that's, could not be foreseen. That's the president getting COVID. And I think they understand that happens. It happens to a number of foreign leaders where there are unforeseen events at home that mandate a slight shift in the schedule, but we will still be there attending the meetings that we intended to, and still traveling to Vietnam to pay our respects, not on the day of the funeral, but the day after, to meet with senior government officials. And I think our allies and partners certainly understand the importance we place on the region, and understand that we have the ability to do more than one thing at a time.
Sure. I think that obviously the Secretary's travel has been to the region a lot, but the President did miss the ASEAN Leaders Summit last year. That will also be in November this year. Do you have anything you can tell us on how the US would be represented at that one? Obviously ministerial this week, but the Leaders Summit.
The summit, no, I can't. I would let the White House speak to the president's participation. Obviously, that's still, I think, a couple of months away. But as I said, the overall presence of the U.S. in the region, I think if you look at what we said at the outset of this administration, how we plan to make a major investment of time, of resources, of energy and capacity in the Indo-Pacific, we have borne that out through our actions the past 3.5 years, and we intend to continue to do that for the next 6 months.